So the other day, my wife and I were at a crane game place, and look what we won. It's a little Rowlett plushie. It only cost us like $40 worth of token, but worth it. So alongside being a Pokemon master, I also happen to be a clinical psychologist licensed in the state of California as well as the province of Ontario, and I've been studying and practicing evidence-based mental health for the better part of a decade now, and certainly anxiety disorders are among the bread and butter of different problems that I treat. And today I'll be talking about 6 of the things you should stop doing in order to improve your anxiety. So let's get into it. Number 1 is to stop listening to what the anxiety is telling us to do, which is to avoid. So we need to avoid avoiding when it comes to situations that make us unnecessarily anxious. Obviously, if you're, meeting a bear in the middle of the woods, you should probably listen to the anxiety and probably get the heck out of there. On the other hand, on a day-to-day, when you notice the anxiety is pretty problematic, it's not very helpful, in that case, listening to anxiety and avoiding a situation can actually perpetuate the anxiety in the long run. It reduces short-term distress, but maintains anxiety in the long run because the anxiety says, good, like I told this guy, Parky, to avoid, and he did. Nothing bad happened to him. So therefore, it was a good thing that he avoided the party. It was a good thing he avoided the presentation. It was a good thing that he didn't talk to the cute girl. Like all of those things maintain our anxiety in the long run by almost confirming the belief that getting out of there, avoiding was the right decision. And this principle of not avoiding or avoiding is kind of the main principle of treating anxiety disorders in the first place, which is exposure exercises, where we basically put ourselves in a position to sit with sort of a phobic stimulus, maybe sit with that dog we were afraid of, or to, imagine ourselves being in a plane, putting ourselves in situations that make us anxious over time, and by sitting with it allows our brain to recognize that nothing bad is going to happen and allows the distress to reduce over time. And in some ways related to this idea of avoiding, tip number 2 is to not try to reduce uncertainty. So uncertainty is a natural part of life, and our inacceptance or allergy to uncertainty is actually what generates and maintains certain anxiety disorders like generalized anxiety, where there's a constant fear of novel, threatening, uncertain situations because we assume that uncertainty means bad. Like if I were to do something new, there's going to be likely a bad outcome. And by following sort of the avoidance, we're basically confirming the idea that the bad thing would have happened if I didn't avoid it. And number 2, I wouldn't be able to handle the bad thing that does happen. So instead of avoiding all of uncertainty, what I encourage you to do, at least at certain times, is to jump into the uncertainty. Allow yourself to embrace novelty, ambiguity, and see it for what it is, which is kind of a neutral thing. Like if I were to try out a new restaurant, it's not inherently going to be bad. It could be, a really great dish. It could be kind of a medium, okay dish, and it could be a really terrible dish, but we don't really know unless we do the thing. And the most important parts of this sort of experiment and experimenting with life is to be able to say, oh, like not all uncertainty is inherently bad. Sometimes it can be really cool and really positive experience. And also number 2, even if it is the bad experience, I can handle it. I'm resilient to life stressors and life's lemons, and that allows me to feel more resilient in my day-to-day life. Okay, tip number 3 is to avoid overreacting to symptoms of anxiety. So when our sort of internal smoke signals go off, we don't want to go into sort of crisis mode and think, oh my gosh, like there has to be a fire and these symptoms themselves are super uncomfortable, so I need to get away from them. And these symptoms like, shallow breathing, racing heart, sweating, trembling. Yes, they're absolutely uncomfortable, but they're not life threatening. But when we treat them as something inherently dangerous, it can lead to the spiral, catastrophizing our symptoms of like, oh, I'm noticing my heart is racing. What if I'm having a panic attack? Or what if even worse, I'm having a heart attack? And unsurprisingly, when we have these catastrophic thoughts, our heart is going to race even more. We're going to sweat even more. We might start to notice feeling cold or feeling really hot. And then it might eventually lead to a panic attack. So instead of adding suffering to our suffering, we don't want to necessarily catastrophize the symptoms of anxiety, which is really just there to protect us, as well as to note that something could be threatening and that's not life threatening at all. So when it comes to avoidance, one of the interesting things is that they don't always have to be sort of this very full-blown way of avoiding situations. Like when we think about avoidance, we're thinking about not doing our homework or not going to that party. But avoidance can sometimes come very subtly as well, where, for example, if someone is going to the party, but they're only interacting with their friend, or every time that they interact with somebody, they have to take a shot because they need to kind of reduce their sort of sense of self-consciousness, reduce the anxiety in a sort of artificial way. So one thing that can be really helpful, tip number 4, is to avoid mood-altering substances or other types of safety behaviors that get you out of the situation. Like when you're doing exposure and you're talking to somebody, you don't want to have drank alcohol before, or you don't want to like not look at them or say as minimal things as possible to avoid the situation of sounding stupid. So be mindful about the things that you are doing to subtly reduce anxiety, otherwise known as safety behaviors, and avoid not doing those things. Or
One semester later.
avoid doing those things. And tip number 5 is to not take our worries too seriously. And the reason I say that is because we as human beings naturally have thousands upon thousands of thoughts every single day. And it's interesting because we almost like gravitate towards the ones that are a bit more negative, like I'm worthless or what if that happens. It's never really the ones that feel good or are kind of neutral. Like they're usually attuned to specific threats, which makes sense evolutionarily because we want to make sure that we are keeping the thoughts that are most likely to keep us safe. The brain is designed to keep us safe, not necessarily make us feel less anxious or, be more happy, for example. So in that context, however, when it comes to these specific thoughts, they're not necessarily true just because we have a strong emotional attunement to it. Just because I feel a sense of fear when I have a thought, what if something bad were to happen? It doesn't make that thought any more true than an alternative, less emotionally evocative thought like, oh, maybe nothing bad will happen. So in this context, one thing that can be helpful is to recognize that thoughts are just thoughts. They're not facts, and I don't have to engage in them. If it is helpful to engage with them, then great, and we can do that and problem solve. But if not, then we can just say, well, that was an interesting thought. Like, thanks for coming up with that, brain, and just let it go. And then tip number 6, final one, is to not keep worries vague. And this is kind of an interesting one, but follow me here for a moment. When we think about how we catastrophize and how we worry, you might notice that when we think about the worry itself, there's not actually a lot of detail. Like we might think, oh my gosh, like if I don't pass this exam, something terrible is going to happen. Or what if this happens with my partner someday? And then things will be terrible and my life will be horrible. So you can kind of see how nebulous the worry actually is. And we tend to, in some ways, almost like cognitively run away from that at some point. We're like, oh my gosh, like I can't even handle this thought anymore. I need to, play with my plushie, or I need to like go on my phone, whatever that might be. We escape and avoid sort of what the sort of catastrophic outcome is, or starting to play out what that story is. So if you do happen to find yourself stuck in sort of like a hypothetical worry, see what it'd be like to actually take a journal and sort of catastrophize and allow yourself to run with the story. And what a lot of my patients sometimes find is that, oh, like when I actually played out that story, I could kind of pull up from my own resilience. Like, okay, like this would be really bad, but then I could maybe do this. Maybe I could find another job. Maybe I'll pull upon my parents to help me. Like, I would have a lot of resources. So, in this context, just the same, when you are sort of playing up the thought, allow yourself enough time to really process the worry, and then also allow yourself some solace about what could be some resilient ways you could think about it. Allow that resilience to show up by getting closer to what the actual details of the situation is. And then finally, tip number 7. I know I said 6, but why not? We can have a sort of secret fun one, and 7 is a nice number. Tip number 7 is to not do nothing after watching this video. So, assume if you came to watch this video, you wanted to improve on your mental health, you wanted to manage anxiety, you wanted to, at least you had the curiosity to figure out what are some of the things that would be helpful to do, or in this case, not do, in order to improve your anxiety. And one of the things that would be important for you after taking this information is to, of course, apply it to your life. So this doesn't have to be anything big. You might even just do something very small, like, today, as you go outside, you would normally avoid talking to the cashier, and you would normally actually just go to sort of the self-checkout. But in this case, maybe what you can do is to talk to the cashier or try out that new restaurant that you were, avoiding because you didn't know if you liked it or not. So it can be as small as thing as possible, but give it a shot so that it really gives you a chance to get something out of this video. But if you do feel like you need a couple more videos to learn more about anxiety before you take those first steps, I'll throw out a couple of those videos that you can watch over here. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Take good care. Bye-bye.